Hey everybody, this is Jason Creel and this is the Lawn Care Life. Today I want to go over some weed control basics, weed control 101. Some of you are maybe have a lawn care business and you're mowing grass and you don't quite really understand what those weed control people are out there doing. You may understand a little bit of the terminology, and then some of you, maybe a homeowner, maybe you're looking to start a weed control business, and again, you just don't have to understand. So let's go over some of the basics of what makes a successful weed control program, and I can show you some of the products that I use for my program, and then just talk to you about what we're actually trying to accomplish in a program. So let's get started with that right now. See here, this lawn's been overseeded with ryegrass. It's actually a warm season lawn. It's going to be have Bermuda grass in it, but it's been overseeded. But when we're talking about weed control, one of the things, now just as far as basic terminology, you might hear people, if you know nothing about it, hear people talk about a pre-emergent and a post-emergent herbicide. And so basically in very basic terms, pre-emergent is trying to prevent future weeds, where a post-emergent is trying to get rid of your existing weeds. Now it's great if you can combine those and apply them at the same time, because oftentimes you're going to have existing weeds and then you're also trying to prevent future weeds simultaneously. So for instance, when in my spray tank right now, I've got a pre-emergent in there and I think 3 different post-emergents that are trying to get rid of the existing weeds, but I'm also really trying to prevent the weeds that are going to be coming in and starting to germinate this spring and would really show up and be ugly in the lawn this summer. So when it comes to a good program, you got a few things that you want to talk about. You want to know, what do you actually apply to the lawn? And then you want to know when to apply. Those things are both very, very important, because you can have a great product and apply it at the wrong time and it not be effective. Or you may put something out at the correct time, but it's the wrong product. It's not labeled for your grass type. So, you know, in basic understanding, you want to read and understand the label that comes on the back of the product to make sure that it's for the grass type that you have for the application, and then make sure that you're using it according to the label at the right rate, and also for the target weeds that you're trying to control. Let me give you an example. Let's say you've got a Bermuda grass lawn, which is what I deal mostly with in the South. Sometimes what happens is I get out there and I start spraying lawns in January and February, and a few customers will wonder, why am I doing that? The grass is dormant, it's brown. You don't need to be here till March, I've had people tell me. Well, that's actually not true, okay? And because the reason is, one, you may have some cool season weeds there that are hanging around, some dandelions, you got henbit, poannual, stuff like that we're trying to get rid of if you have it in lawn. But we're also trying to get that pre-emergent herbicide down before the weeds germinate in the spring, which it was going to be based on the soil temperatures. It's going to vary from area to area. The same program is not going to have the same exact timing in every area, and it can vary year to year depending on the weather. If we get a warmer spring, then those weeds are going to germinate earlier. If it stays colder longer and gets some late frost, then it may take longer for those weeds to germinate. So I want to get that pre-emergent down and have it watered in before the warm season weeds germinate, weeds like crabgrass and things like that. So here's an example of some of the products that I'm using early in the year to put out for weed control on the lawns. You'll start with this one. This is a Resolute, and if you don't have a big tank sprayer like the one that you see here, and a lot of homeowners obviously wouldn't, and sometimes when people are starting off in a weed control business, they don't have it either. But you can get a lot of these products, a lot of your pre-emergents, you can get in a granular form, so you can have a push spreader and be able to put them out that way. So you'll see here the active ingredient is prodiamine, and that is the pre-emergent. That's what's going to help prevent the weeds from ever really being seen in the lawns. We're going to put this out early in the year before the weeds germinate. To be honest with you, if you put this out after the weeds germinate, it's not really going to do you any good. Then we're going to combine it in the tank, and again, this is going to be harder to do if you got a push spreader and you're using a granular program. You're going to need to get you a handheld sprayer or a little backpack sprayer and just kind of spot treat the weeds. But it's one advantage of having a tank. You can mix these products together. So I put the pre-emergent in there with this is a 3-way herbicide, and basically what it's doing is trying to get rid of those existing weeds. Like I said, this time of year, early in the year, you got cool season weeds. Like in our area, you see a lot of henbit and dandelions and clover and things like that. This is atrazine. You'll see here it's a restricted use pesticide. Most of these products, that's a misunderstanding for a lot of homeowners, that you have to have a special license to buy these products. It's actually not true for most of them, but there are a few, again, atrazine being one of them. What you're paying somebody to do as far as a weed control service, you're paying them for their knowledge and for their equipment and for the service, basically paying them to help make your lawn look great. But you're not necessarily paying them because they have access to special products that you can't buy. Triplet is going to work on certain types of weeds, the post-emergent. The atrazine also helps with that as well. And then you say, well, what is this? This is our surfactant. So what it does, it basically helps the herbicide to stick to the plant better, so that the plant will take it in and it'll kill the intended weeds. So it just makes it more effective. Now, a couple of things. Sometimes people think that a pre-emergent, if you're a beginner and kind of new to this, and this is what this video is intended for, but some people think a pre-emergent is going to prevent all weeds. I sprayed a pre-emergent. I hear this sometimes. I sprayed a pre-emergent and I still had weeds. What's going on? Well, it doesn't prevent all weeds. It's going to prevent many of your annual weeds. Weeds that die off annually and reproduce by putting out seeds, and it can keep those seeds from germinating. But it's not going to kill your perennial weeds that just hang around all year long. Maybe they go dormant in the winter, but they come back from the same root system, and they're not an annual weed, they're a perennial weed. So you understand the difference in an annual and perennial. The pre-emergent is going to help with the annuals, not the perennials. And very important note, by far your cheapest and many times most effective way for weed control is through a pre-emergent herbicide. The putting this down before the weeds germinate is going to save you a lot of effort in trying to get rid of weeds with post-emergent herbicides. So you combine them together, but let's say you just said, well, I'm going to skip the pre-emergent and I'll just spray the weeds as they come up. Well, a couple problems with that. One, you're going to have a lot of weeds in many situations, and two, the products that you need to use to get rid of the weeds are much more expensive, typically speaking, in this situation. Let's say, for instance, this product's relatively inexpensive to use, and you use it and it'll prevent almost all crabgrass in the lawn. Well, let's say you skip that part and you got a lawn full of crabgrass. Well, you're going to have to use a much more expensive product to get rid of your crabgrass, and it's also going to be much more difficult. It's a lot easier to prevent it on the front end and less expensive than to switch over and say, well, I'm just going to spray them as they come up. It's going to be less effective and more expensive. So that's very important to remember. Now, let's say you put out your pre-emergent, your post-emergent, and you spray it early in the year, and what happens? You still have some weeds. Now, it's going to greatly reduce the amount of weeds you have, but you still have weeds. And so at that point, what we typically do is we start spot treating the weeds. Now, that may happen in the spring, may happen in the summer, on into the fall, but we start spot treating weeds with a little handheld sprayer or a backpack sprayer, whatever you got. Let me show you a couple products that we use for spot treating weeds. So these are a couple I use quite regularly. You got Celsius over here, and then you got Blindside. There's other products. There's products that are specially formulated for sedges, like products like Sedge Hammer or Pro Sedge or things like that. But Blindside has some effect on sedges as well. Celsius is just a good all-around product. It's going to have a lot of success on many different kind of weeds. So grassy weeds and broadleaf weeds. So these are just a couple of products that, again, are going to be a lot more expensive if you were to mix them in a tank, than some of these other products like Triplet or Atrazine. But when you're using these products, you just mix them up in small batches in a backpack sprayer, handheld sprayer, and you can spot treat the existing weeds that are still going to show up in your lawn. It's almost never going to be a perfect lawn that has no weeds. Now, sometimes I get in a situation where I have customers and they say, we don't don't care about our yard being green and lush. We just want you to do weed control. Well, a big part of weed control is having a nice thick lawn. One of the greatest things you can do to keep your weeds out is have nice, thick, healthy turf grass, which is going to naturally do a good job of preventing a lot of weeds. It's not a perfect solution, but it definitely helps. You'll see sometimes if you have a yard that has some nice thick grass in one area and a little bit of a thinner grass in another area, oftentimes the weeds are going to show up where that thin grass is. So what we do is, once the weather starts warming up, again, this is, I'm telling you, mostly for warm season grasses. It's going to be a different program for cool season grasses. But when the weather starts warming up in our area around May, then we start putting out fertilizer, and that's when that grass can really take off. Because like I said, if I can get a nice, thick, healthy lawn, it's going to greatly reduce the amount of weed problems that I have in the future of that lawn. So understanding how fertilization and weed control work together. If you got weeds and you throw fertilizer out there, well then basically you're fertilizing the weeds along with the turf grass, and the turf grass is having a hard time because there's so many weeds that it's competing with for space in the lawn. But if you say, I'm just going to do the weed control and not fertilize, well then, yeah, maybe that's successful to some extent, but you're not going to have as healthy of a looking lawn. And two, if your grass doesn't really nice and thick, it's going to lead to problems and vacancies in the lawn that can ultimately lead to a weedy area. Now, like you have warm season grasses and cool season grasses, you got warm season weeds and cool season weeds. So when we put out that pre-emergent early in the year, we're trying to prevent the warm season weeds that typically going to germinate in the spring. Well, then come around when the weather starts coming in towards the fall and they start getting cooler temperatures at night, the warm season weeds often die out or go dormant if they're a perennial, and we have a whole new batch of weeds. We have those cool season weeds. So it's very important to put out a pre-emergent in the fall to help prevent those cool season weeds. You want to get that down before we start getting those cool nights. Typically around here we start applying that. I'm in Alabama, we try applying that sometime in September on into October. Same idea, we're putting out a pre and a post-emergent at the same time. Pre-emergent, we're trying to prevent those cool season weeds. Post-emergent, maybe we're trying to finish off some of the warm season weeds, or if some of those cool season weeds have already germinated, we're trying to take care of those while they're still small and not really visible in the lawn. Because if you miss them at that time, they're going to get larger as the season goes on and on into the winter, into the following spring, and they're going to be bigger and a lot more difficult to control at that period of time. So, for instance, in the fall, we might put out, you could put out this same product, Resolute's going to help control some of those cool season weeds like poa annua and stuff. And we also, for the warm season grasses, we use a product called Spectacle, which is very good at preventing those type of weeds. You're going to mix your surfactant in there with it. We use a product in the fall called Simazine instead of atrazine, and then maybe some 2,4-D in there to help take care of some of those cool season weeds that are already showing up, or maybe weeds like dandelions that might have been hanging around all summer long, but they're starting to really perk up as the cooler weather approaches. And you wonder how you learn something like this. You know, for me, I buy my products from a company called Harrell's. They're a weed control fertilization supply company. One of their sales reps helped me in developing a program and understanding, you know, which products to use and when to apply them and how to apply them, and really helped me get started in developing a weed control and fertilization program specific to my area, because it's going to vary region to region. Now, one of the things we also do in my area, and we do this in the winter time, though you could do it any time of year, but we put out fast-acting enhanced lime on the lawn. Now, why do you do that? Well, typically in the area I live in, the soil is more acidic, and when your pH gets too low on your soil, eventually it starts making the grass where it can't really take full use of the fertilizer and the nutrients that are in the soil. And so you may see that you put out your fertilizer on the lawn, it just really didn't respond like it has in the past. And this is where you can do a soil test if you want. You can buy kits that probably allow you to do it on your own, or there's probably some sort of a research institution or university around that will do that for you for a small fee. But it can tell you a lot about your soil, including making recommendations of what you apply, and also show you the pH of the soil. So sometimes if your pH gets low, it's going to lock up those nutrients, and so we put out lime annually to help at least maintain the pH, and in certain situations where the lawn is struggling and we'll put extra lime, hoping to actually raise the pH to a better level where the grass is just ideal growing. I tell people, you know, it's like growing anything. If you're trying to grow tomato plants, there's an ideal pH range that's going to be best for growing those tomatoes, and it's the same with your turf grasses as well. So if you're looking to get started in weed control, don't be overly intimidated. Maybe this video just helped you have a little bit better understanding of what the weed control people are doing on the lawn, or maybe you're a homeowner wanting to learn a little bit yourself, or maybe you're looking to start a weed control and fertilization business. If that's the case, I have some resources at lawncarelife.com that have been helpful for people, you know, in that situation. But listen, it's not super simple. You probably need somebody to help you, but it's not so overly complicated. You just understand, like, listen, we're trying to prevent weeds with a pre-emergent. We're trying to get rid of existing weeds with a post-emergent, and then we're trying to fertilize your lawn to make it as healthy as possible, adding nutrients that grass can use, and then we're trying to maintain an ideal pH that's going to help that lawn. Sometimes acidic soil also lead to certain weeds having weed problems. Yes, it takes some basic equipment to get started. If you're starting off in a weed control business, we recommend that you at least get a 200-gallon tank. Somebody asked me that recently. It would be better to have a 300-gallon tank. What you don't want is to get out and start spraying lawns and have to come back and fill up middle of the day. So a 200-gallon could get you started. 300-gallon would be better. If you're a homeowner, or maybe just somebody wanting to dabble in this a little bit, then you can do a granular program. Some of the products may be a little more expensive, and it's going to be harder to combine products on a granular program. You might have to do a little bit more backpack spraying or handheld spraying for your weed control. But you can get some of these pre-emergent products as a granular and put them out on your lawn and start to see results. But again, understanding what type of grass you have, what type of weeds you're trying to control, and being able to put that product out at the right timing. You know, the right product at the wrong timing is not that effective. And you tell people that there's probably no perfect lawn, and there's no perfect herbicide out there. There's no one product that's just going to kill every weed in your lawn. You can just buy that one product. There's some products will have a great effect on one weed and won't do anything seemingly to another weed. So it's understanding your weeds. I've got a lot of videos on here about weed identification, learning the weeds in your lawn, and then talking about the products that you can use to control those specific weeds. But you got, a lot of times you got sedges, you got grassy weeds, you got broadleaf weeds, and you got cool season weeds, warm season weeds. So there is a lot to learn. But listen, it's not overly intimidating. Hopefully it'll start making sense to you after a while. I would encourage you to go check out some of the other videos on my channel, Lawn Care Life. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, which is beside the subscribe button. What that does is let YouTube notify you when I create new videos. Appreciate you watching the video. Talk to you later. Bye.